Welcome to Coffee Time, the internet show where three lifelong friends enjoy a cup of coffee and or tea as they talk about anything and everything, what the world says about it, and what the word says about it. Let's get brewing. Hello, guys.
Hey.
How are we doing?
Hello.
Welcome to this episode. My name is Andrew. We've got Evan in this corner. We've got Ian. I can't actually see him, but I know he's in a corner
What's
somewhere.
up? It's me.
Actually, in a corner.
I am
Actually
in a corner currently, yes.
Oh, that was just a good guess. That's a good guess. Well, welcome to the discussion. We usually like to start out these episodes with a quick update on how we've all been. So let's get right into our loose leaf update. So, I'm listed as starting first, so I'll keep it short. It's only been, how long has it been since, it's been a week since we last recorded, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, for you who are listening, this is releasing normal time, but we're recording a week in advance, which is super nice.
Yes.
So, from generational decline to this episode, it's been a week. And over the weekend, I was up in the mountains. I went camping for the first time with my brother-in-law, which was a fantastic experience. He's been doing car camping for a while, and he recently got a Rivian. If you know what Rivian is, it's like a Tesla, but for camping, and way better. And so it was a good time driving around in that. I brought my parents' Subaru. We set up camp. We were out towards Aspen. We went to Maroon Bells, beautiful hike, and it was pretty cool. It was the first time I was ever able to see the Milky Way with just my eyes. It was insane. But I think the best part about the trip was we got to have some really good conversations while we were hiking. It was a 9-mile hike, so it was long.
Sheesh.
And we got to have good conversations and then good talks around the campfire as well. So it was a really good time. And everything else in my life has been going forward just the same, pretty much. So
Good.
Evanson?
Oh, hello. So all of my life revolves around like eating, which we talked about the diet last week. Working, which I think we talked about in the first episode. And then church. Those are like the only things I do right now. I will say that we got this little group chat going that hopefully will have us doing more experience stuff with other people. But we'll talk about church this week. So we had this like Heights conference, which is kind of the vision casting weekend for our church. And it was just like super awesome. Talked a lot about using like what you have now and multiplying it, like what you already have. Like you don't have to do anything new. Like God gave you a bunch of talents and gifts. Use what you have and multiply that and do it well to honor God. The next 16 months of our church is all about multiply. So, and it's not just talking about getting married and having kids. It's like multiply everything. Like do things, multiply disciples, multiply, baptisms and planting churches, those kind of things. So super awesome.
That's cool.
But with that, I heard the Lord talking to me about this program that they have at the church, which is called the Residence Program. And they just basically, it's like going to seminary, but it's like through their church. So
Cool.
I've been praying about that, and everybody listening can pray with me in that
Yes,
too.
sir.
Just
Yeah.
seeing what the
That's
Lord
great.
has for me. I have my first interview on Monday, so
Nice.
it's not until next
man.
August, but so lots of time to pray.
Cool.
Good. That's awesome, man.
Cool.
Big
Yeah,
stuff
that's
in the
really cool.
lives, man.
Big stuff.
My stuff isn't as big.
Don't say that.
We're in North Carolina now. Sorry, I'm getting some weird throat noises. I just drank the coffee and something came out. Obviously, we're in North Carolina. We stated that in the first episode. Trying to get the apartment all set up. We have almost everything. We have a few more things we need to get. Definitely not essential stuff that we need to get. But we're starting this project, and we're going to turn our sunroom, which is basically just like a second dining room with a bunch of windows, but it's just called a sunroom. It leads onto this nice little patio. we're going to turn this sunroom into an indoor garden room. So we're going to grow some herbs, and we have these 2 plants that we want to cut and multiply those because they just look cool. They're like dangly plants, so like they're really viney.
Ooh.
So we're going to
Nice.
hopefully grow a couple more of those and then grow some herbs and stuff indoors. Since we're
Okay.
in a condo right now, we don't have a yard. So we're just utilizing the extra space we have here, and we're going to turn that into a garden room / Bible room. And we're planning to build most of the furniture by hand. We're going to try and just up our skills, just learn some stuff. So stuff that we can pass on to our kids, and maybe even pass on the furniture to our kids one day and sell the vegetables or herbs, whatever we grow. We'd like to sell to whoever we can, and obviously give it to family. So yeah, that's kind of my update. We're starting a project, and we're super excited to get started. So yeah.
Cool. Look up microgreens.
Okay.
Microgreens.
Put them in your smoothie.
High density vitamins and minerals, and
Okay.
people like to buy those. So
Okay.
That's awesome. That
Yeah.
sounds so cool.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to learn gardening or like building little terrariums. You should do some terrariums.
Yes, I wanted to do some terrariums. They'd look sick in like a Bible room. So, like it's like a,
That'd be real cool.
what would you call that? Like quiet time room, I guess. Prayer room,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. But-
meditation room.
Yeah. So, we're also hopefully gonna get like a dehydrator so we can dehydrate some of the herbs, and that
Ian,
way
we
we
should-
can.
come in together and get a freeze dryer.
Yes, dude, that'd be sweet.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's smart. That sounds great.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited. Since there's so many windows, we're hopefully gonna get. Hopefully the plants will grow okay indoors. I'll do some research on indoor plants. What's the best? Like I know herbs grow pretty well inside, especially if you get a lamp for them. So we'll see how that works out. I'll keep you guys updated if it turns out really nice. Maybe we'll record an episode in there or something.
Ooh.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. Ian, tell us what we are drinking today.
Yes, I was in charge of the drink today for this week. Super simple recipe. Full recipe is gonna be up on our socials once this episode releases. Super simple recipe, which I'm okay with. You guys can make it in the morning pretty easy and store some of the ingredients for later. I call it the raspberry cream. It's just a white chocolate mocha, so an espresso shot, white chocolate sauce, some milk, and then raspberry whipped cream on top of that. And it turned out beautifully. It's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I almost drank it all already.
I'm down to the cream.
We got to learn to pace ourselves. I'm like, it's almost gone. Mine is almost gone.
As long as we're drinking the drops that are left during the show, then I think it's okay.
Then it counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it counts.
The cream's getting in my mustache.
Yeah, the flavor saver.
Oh man, Evan, I think you are telling us about the DIDAR today, which we should probably say what that acronym is as well.
Oh yeah,
So,
we should
here's the
probably
DIDAR.
start doing that.
Don't you dare, Roger.
Yep, that's it. Don't you dare, Roger.
Don't you dare.
Isn't it don't you dare
Rules.
do your own research?
Nope.
No. Don't you dare rules.
Yep.
All right. All right, well, let's do our don't you dare rules. The DIDAR.
The
That's
DIDAR.
what we're calling it. We developed it for this season.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still kind of new to it. So you haven't heard it very many times in all of our stuff, just in the last 2 episodes and now the 3rd episode going forward. So number 1, do not quote our teaching. So when we're talking about the Bible and biblical things, don't just quote, because we can be wrong. We are humans with flaws, and sometimes we get information incorrect. And so take everything that we say with a grain of salt and do your own research, which is the 3rd one. But the 2nd one is fact check everything in Scripture. I could make a bold claim about something in the Bible, and you guys should not just take it like I'm your pastor or something. You need to go do your own research in Scripture. Read it in your Bible and make sure that we're doing everything correctly. Hold us accountable to what we're doing in Scripture. And then, do your own research. That's it. That's the Didar.
Boom.
Boom. Thank you, Evan and Ian. So, I'm very excited for this episode. This is steeping. And what we do here is we lay out what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the episode. Today, we are talking about travel. And we'll be thinking a lot about it. And when I was originally thinking about this episode, what we were planning on discussing, I figured we would share some stories of places we've traveled to, why people travel. Maybe we'd share some hidden gems that people could go to. And that seemed like a pretty good format for an episode, and I still think it would be. But the more I thought about it, the more layers I uncovered to travel, and I started to ask, what even is traveling? How do we travel? And why do we love to travel? And so that's what we'll be talking about. Those three main points. And then Ian and Evan have done some research and some thinking and some empirical research, and so they have stuff to bring as well. But generally, the conversation is going to flow from asking what is travel, the unconventional modes of travel, and understanding why we love to travel. So, we like to make sure that we share our sources, or at least we're trying to. I keep forgetting to, but we have sources for today in our bibliography. So, the dictionaries that we will be using today, Oxford Languages and Merriam-Webster. Articles, Music in the Brain by Peter Voost et al. On Nature Reviews, Neuroscience, Nature.com, and then NASA.gov, Why Go to Space. We have interviews and different feedback from anonymous participants. A few of those will be named because they're family. And then our Bible translations we're using are NIV, ESV, and LEB. Some directly quoted, some memorized. So, the goal of this conversation today is not just to tell you what we think about travel. I want all of you who are listening to start to really consider personally why you enjoy traveling. That will make more sense when we talk about the unconventional modes of travel for humans, but it's meant to take you on a deep trip through why we travel the way we do. So, let's see what happens along the way. We're going to start off by talking about the definition of traveling. And to start that, I want to ask you, Ian and Evan, what your definitions for traveling are, if you were to give a personal one.
Personal definition of travel. I think travel has to be a few hours worth of covering ground. So in a car, walking, that's traveling to me. Moving from location to location is my literal definition of travel. So,
my definition is to escape the day-to-day or the mundane with, obviously traveling. I feel like sometimes I travel 2 hours to Raleigh or Charlotte, one of the two, and we just get magic sushi. And to me, that's like traveling. And that's escaping the day-to-day and the mundane and doing something special.
Yeah.
okay.
Those are actually both great definitions. So Ian's is going from one location to another. Evan's is breaking routine, essentially. So something, going somewhere and experiencing something new. And that's actually pretty common from people that I've asked. So I have 4 different definitions that I've gathered over the past week for what people... or how people define travel personally. So anonymous number 1 said, travel is going somewhere that is not your place of residency. So that's kind of like breaking up your usual routine and your usual environment. Anonymous number 2 said, travel is going somewhere that you do not routinely go to. So like Evan said, going to Raleigh or Charlotte and grabbing some sushi. Anonymous number 3 says, travel is experiencing something you do not routinely experience. So it's not so much about destination, more about experience. And then Anonymous number 4 is just one word: necessary. They say travel is necessary.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know what your thoughts are. Those kind of are the most popular definitions that I've gathered from the past week. I feel like you guys kind of touched on those. Would you agree with those, or out of those definitions, is there one that resonates with you more?
I would say I would expect those answers when I go. If I were to go and ask somebody, I would expect a similar answer to that. I think, which maybe we'll touch on this later, but when I really think about travel and what we use it for and how we use it, it's always some sort of escape, whether that's like your mundane, like day to day, like Evan said, or wanting to experience something new. It's always the escape of where you're at right now. So I would say that's kind of what I expected, and I would say that's mostly true for most people.
I agree. I think that they hit the nail on the head. It is. It's just, and I like the last one, necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I think the older you get, the more necessary it becomes, because I feel like your world gets smaller in a way. As a kid, you have like everything is traveling, man. Like I remember being a kid and going outside and making the world whatever I wanted it to be, just with my imagination, and I could travel anywhere.
Yeah.
But now it's like I actually have to leave the location I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually got to go somewhere. Yeah. Which we'll talk about both of those things later on. So you guys, it's like you guys have already walked through the outline that I have, and I haven't told you what it is. This happens often when we record episodes.
We're like-minded
So-
individuals.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, kindred spirits,
Yeah.
travelers on a. Never mind. We're just gonna shut that down. So we're gonna use our dictionaries now. Oxford Languages, looking at travel as a verb, says traveling is to go from one place to another, typically over a distance of some length.
Okay.
Hold on to that typically in the back of your mind. Merriam-Webster, I grabbed the intransitive verb and transitive verb, and I have some examples so that we know what the heck those are, because I had to look it up. So the intransitive verb for travel is to go on or as if on a trip or tour. So e.g., I like to travel. The transitive verb is a journey through or over. So the example for that is I traveled to Kuala Lumpur. The idea that you are going somewhere or you like to go somewhere.
Okay.
And you guys shared your definitions. Anonymous interviewees shared theirs. And gathering all of these different perspectives and combining them into one, along with some deeper thoughts, I have wrote out? I have this personal definition, which I've come to. So my personal definition of travel is the experience of novelty or the attempt to achieve it. What do you think?
I like
Agree,
it.
disagree?
I agree. Yeah.
Agree.
Yes.
It might seem vague just because we haven't gotten to the second part, but that's what we're going to
Yeah.
right now. And we're going to talk about it quickly because we all have stuff we want to talk about. So this next part that we're looking at is unconventional modes of travel for humans. We typically think of travel as happening physically. We could talk a long time about different airlines, Southwest, United. I'm not going to say anything about any airlines. Train lines. We could talk about boats, ships, paragliders, elevators, I guess, kind of count, and other things which would physically move you from one place to another. But there's something underpinning why I think we as humans generally, like Ian said, most people most of the time, like the experience of traveling. And that's kind of where we're headed. But to do this, we need to think more deeply about how we can travel somewhere without physically going anywhere. So we're going to call all the non-physical travel, just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to call that unconventional modes of travel. So keep that in mind. I'm going to ask a question now. I want you both to answer after you think about it for a bit. And with this question is a goal. As you're answering it, think about, between all the answers that you share, what is common between them. So here's the question. What are some modes of non-physical travel that we as humans generally enjoy?
Dreaming and daydreaming, I'd say. So like sleeping and dreaming and daydreaming.
Yeah.
Thinking of going somewhere.
Yeah, that's good. I
That's
guess
good.
reading books, articles,
Mhm.
other people's experiences online, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Reading other people's stories of places they've been.
Yeah, that's like especially when it goes to like just thinking it back to church again. But like when a missionary comes and shares his experiences and they bring pictures and stuff, you can almost, if you wanted to, put yourself in that place and
Be there.
experience that without actually being there.
You guys have already figured all this stuff out. You guys are on it. When we think of travel, we typically think of a long session of planning, budgeting, financing, hour to hour, minute to minute, figuring out what we want to do. But I think we travel a whole lot more than we are aware of. And one of the problems I think we have nowadays is we have so much access to more of the world than we used to. You know, back in the day, our world around us, you know, that was kind of what we had access to. Now we can travel anywhere with our phone. And so we can see pictures of what other people are doing. And I think that gives us the false impression that travel has to be something that you could post on Instagram
Right.
and get a bunch of appreciation for. But like you said, we travel through reading. We travel through thinking, through our imagination, through listening to other people's stories, like you said, missionary stories. I think we travel through music. I think music takes us places.
Yeah.
And I definitely think we travel when we watch TV series or movies, documentaries, and things like that.
Video games,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, video games.
especially
also.
VR.
Yeah,
dude.
that's true. Yeah,
a
that really
big
takes you
one.
somewhere.
That's a big
Yeah.
one.
Oh.
I don't know if you ever played a
So-
lot of VR at like one time, but it actually tricks your brain into thinking you were there.
Right.
Like if you like really play it for like 4 or 5 hours, let's say, your brain thinks about it for a long time after it's off.
Yeah.
Just so you know, that's like super dangerous, and that's like I don't play a lot because of that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary. So we agree that those are your unconventional modes of travel. Traveling without physically going anywhere. You can sit and travel in this way.
Right.
So I gave you a goal. That goal was, what is in common between all of these answers? So
The thought, I guess, would be my answer.
Going somewhere that's not here.
so somewhere
You know,
somewhere that's new.
leaving where you're at, I guess. Escaping, I guess, would be the word to say. Maybe.
Right. Yeah. Ian, you said the thought. So
Yeah.
like are you referring to the personal engagement that's involved to travel through these
I think
modes?
stumped me there for a second. Well, they all have in common is you sit there and you ponder on it and you think about it so much that you almost just for a second trick yourself into thinking, man, I'm loving this. Then you wake up and you're like, oh,
Yeah. There's a lot of times I've won $1 million. That's all I'm saying.
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So I think I would agree that all of these things involve taking you from one place to another, kind of like Evan said, but also engaging your mind and your imagination and your curiosity. Two anonymous participants, interviewees that I talked to earlier today and last night said that among these things, they listed the same things as well. So these are fairly common in people's minds when they hear unconventional modes of travel. And what was pointed out to me, and I hadn't thought of this, was that each of these modes requires another human individual or group's involvement. There is no TV show or movie without director, actors, story writers. There's no book without an author. There's no music without a musician. There's no story without a storyteller. And so in each of these unconventional modes of travel, there is somebody else which is creating an experience for you to experience. And when they said that, I was like, oh, that's just vicarious. Everything mentioned is a vicarious experience. After all, something can't be vicarious if there's not another individual to experience something through, because that's the definition of vicarious.
Right.
So it's really interesting that each of these, like you said earlier, each of these different modes of unconventional transportation are, in a sense, an escape, a way to experience something through someone else or through somebody else's storytelling or a song. It's vicarious.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's like a logical conclusion? Do you think there's nuances that are incorrect?
I think there's one error that I found, I think, in that conclusion. And is that if we're classifying sleep dreaming, as a way of unconventional transportation, then sometimes your dreams make no sense and you still feel like you were there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no one else behind it except your brain.
Right. That's an individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose that's a great point. I hadn't considered that. Maybe there are certain categories which are generally vicarious, where somebody else is involved. But even if that's not it, it's almost your imagination placing yourself in a story that is not reality.
Right.
Or not your current situation,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty much what dreaming is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
would say that being vicarious is definitely the conclusion for the majority of those unconventional travels. Because,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a dangerous place, I think, of wanting to escape more, like so often that we're always like, man, I wish I was there. Oh, man, I listened to that song and I wish I could go back to that time that song reminded me of. Or, man, I wish I lived in a world like this movie or like this book.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could go to Hawaii. I think it's a dangerous place of like
Yeah.
unsatisfaction.
Yeah.
So that's something
Maybe
that we need to
not
be super
always,
cautious
though.
about. I think, yeah.
Like nostalgia is basically traveling back in time to a
Yeah.
memory or time in your life.
Yeah.
And it
Right.
doesn't always have to be like, oh, I miss those good times. It's like, oh, man, I can't wait to experience these again. Like
Right.
I'm experiencing
Yeah.
it now. That's why I remember it.
I agree with both of those statements. That there's a danger in vicarious experiences or dreaming because it's a way to escape the present reality that you're in. But even with nostalgia, you can look back with gratitude, thankful that you got to experience what you have
Right.
and how that has shaped where you are now. Yeah. I'm trying to decide right now if I want to leave all of those thoughts hanging and hear what you guys have to say. I think that's what we're going to do. So, for everybody who's listening and for you, Evan and Ian, we've talked about what travel is. I presented the definition. It's the experience of novelty or the attempt to achieve it. We've talked about your unconventional modes of travel, which are vicarious experiences or experiences which are not actually reality but are kind of an escape. And I want us to hold on to those things in the back of our heads. But we're going to take a step back from the main path of the show, and I want to hear what Evan and Ian have thought about for this week's episode. So I think, Evan, you are talking some about space.
Yes, kind of. It was kind of a thought I had today because there was the article that I saw. I didn't read it. I think I actually listened to like an update on Instagram on a guy I follow. But he said that Boeing sent down their return pod of those 2 astronauts that are stuck on the space station. And I was like, I wonder what makes people, in light of this conversation that I knew we were having today about travel, I was like, what makes people so interested in going to space? And so NASA, I just Googled like NASA, why do astronauts want to go to space? And it's interesting because NASA has a webpage that says, why go to space? And the first 2 paragraphs, it kind of explain it, but I actually think it kind of summarizes why we travel in general too. So it's kind of interesting. So the first paragraph says, at NASA, we explore the secrets of the universe for the benefit of all, creating new opportunities and aspiring the world through discovery. And then it continues and says, NASA's exploration vision is anchored in providing value for humanity by answering some of the most fundamental questions. And these are the ones that I was like, this kind of makes sense for traveling in general. Why are we here? How did it all begin? Are we alone? And what comes next? And as an addendum to all that, how can we make our lives better? And so I was like, man, that's very, very interesting, Mr. NASA.
That's very interesting.
Because NASA just wrote this. It doesn't have like an author, which is kind of weird. It's just,
oh, how weird.
Apparently NASA is a person, so.
Mr. NASA?
Mr. NASA. But I think these are questions we ask and why, and this has to do with some of the reasons why we travel, you know, like, why are we here? And again, thinking about more of a Christian perspective, like, we're here to bring the good news to every nation and every people group. Like, that's a good reason to travel. Why are we here? And then how did it all begin? And you can think about and read the Bible and get an idea of how it began and how we were created good, but we fell. And it's like, man, you're putting yourself in that place. And, you know, how did it begin? And then, are we alone? And again, you think about these things sometimes. Most of the time, it's at night. You're like, man, I just feel so alone right now. You know, all this, like, that seems kind of depressing, but you're just like, and you dwell on things that happened that day, and you're traveling in your brain, you know. Yeah. And then what comes next? What happens when I win that $1 million lottery that I don't play? and what are all the things I'm going to do? And where am I going to travel? And what am I going to get? And where am I going to bring with me? And it just seems really interesting that that's the reason for going to space, I guess.
Yeah.
I cited something else in my notes, which was like the Bible, Genesis 11, 1 through 9. Because the other thing I wanted to talk about besides space was just like, I don't know if we're at that part in our episode or not, but
I think so.
Just like, like, were we meant to fly? Like those kind of questions. Like, has quick forms of travel and maybe eventually space travel? Like, were we ever meant to do that? And every time I think about that question, it always reminds me of the Tower of Babel and how, like, this group of people came together and they said, let's build a tower to heaven. And God looked down and said, if they work together, they can do it. And so he scattered them. He gave them all different languages and scattered them so that the tower would stop being built. But now we can go to space. It just seems a little interesting, you know, how like maybe we weren't necessarily meant to have quick travel in a sense that we miss out on the people who are right with us, like right next to us. Like, this is a new thing. Like, everybody just like, oh yeah, I fly to New York every day for work. Like, I talked to some guy at the airport the other day, or the last time I traveled, I think. He was a private investigator. He's like, oh yeah, I travel like, I'm on a plane like 3 days a week.
What?
I'm like, that's just crazy that, and I just feel like in my own brain that maybe we weren't meant to do that. I don't know.
There's like the human curiosity and ability to invent is given by God, but it's misused a lot because we're all fallen. And so even though it may not be necessarily inherently a bad thing, it definitely can be.
Like, I'd rather travel back to where I know people than to like go across the street and introduce myself to the neighbor. Like, I feel like that's the problem with being available to just go wherever you want at any time.
You miss what's right in front of you because you're looking too far.
Yeah. To put a whole wrench into the traveling topic, you know.
Oh.
Well,
that is interesting.
I'll touch
Those
on
were the
that
two
a little
things
more.
anyway. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, it doesn't say necessarily anywhere biblically, which we're not supposed to do that. I guess your example could be the Tower of Babel. And I think like a lot of things and a lot of inventions and technology and even just social norms. You're like, man, should we be doing that? That's bad, right? But I think it has to do, or there's a lot of aspects that are really good. Like, we can fly somewhere and be missionaries and spread the
Yeah.
gospel at an accelerated rate because I can fly across the country, fly across the world,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So yeah, I think like most things, because we live in a fallen world, like Andrew said, can be used for bad because we are fallen and we're broken and we're pretty messed up because of the fall, and that decline reference to the past episode has just continued down. And so yeah, we're pretty messed up in a lot of ways, but I think when God gives us an idea, especially when it's spirit-led, which I'll talk spirit-led stuff a little later, or now if you guys want, I think it can be used for good. It's just about the user and your heart posture.
Yeah, I think, share your thoughts and research on spirit-led travel is the title you've given.
Okay, yes. We're there. So
Okay.
Me and my wife just experienced what we fully believe, put our faith in, that was spirit-led travel. We lived in Cheyenne, and my wife was super close to her family, and we had no plans on leaving because she was really close to their family. We wanted to start a family there so that we're all close together. And then we're like, you know what? I think we should move to South Dakota. It's only about 4 hours away, I think, from Cheyenne. So like, let's move to South Dakota. We'll plan it for this date. And then we get about halfway to our move date, and the Lord puts it on our heart to be like, hey, go to North Carolina instead. We're like, well, we'd planned to go to South Dakota. Why are we changing plans right now? And he's like, just go. There's people there who need you. We felt like we've received so many blessings from my parents, and they just sacrificed a lot. So we're like, why can't we? We're young. We've got the time and the resources and the gifts to go help them in the places that they need, which is helping to fix up their home and just be here for them. So we're like, let's do it. So traveling across the country is not easy and it's not cheap, but the Lord made it a incredible experience. Everything went according to plan. We had leftover money. We had no car issues. It was an incredible traveling experience, and I think God used that long distance travel as such a blessing and a way to show His provision. And I think there's a lot of examples in the Bible too of spirit-led travel. I mean, Abraham travels a bunch because the Lord tells him. Israelites out of Egypt. Boom, big travel right there. They're led out of Egypt, and they traveled a long ways. When you really deep dive into that story, it's pretty crazy how long it took for them to get to a lot of those places and how long they had to wait for a lot of stuff. Like when they split the sea, that took, I'm pretty sure, a day to split the sea. So that, I think spirit-led travel is something that's really beautiful and incredible, and you really need to listen and open your eyes and go where He's calling you, because He'll call you to some pretty crazy places. And sometimes spirit-led travel is just traveling around in your own city or your own state and just doing work there. So
yeah. And it's interesting. It seems to me that a lot of the time, the spirit-led travel and the Spirit's leading is not necessarily what we want to do.
Yeah,
but it is the best option.
It's often, it's like what you said at the beginning, why we want to travel and why we sometimes don't want to travel. And I think spirit-led travel is pretty often because we're stubborn and selfish. We never like to move out of where we're comfortable, but sometimes moving away from where you're comfortable is where you need to be. I think that's often the case. We're like, man, really? I have to do that? Like, I had these plans, and I had my own plans, and you have to kill your flesh, you know. Your desires aren't always God's perfect plan, so you need to open your ears.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because there is an open door somewhere does not mean you should walk through it.
Yeah.
Honestly, the whole analogy of open doors is sort of busted because it's not
Off its hinges.
truthfully our idea of it is not really found in scripture. There's reference to an open door, I think twice in Revelation and then in one of Paul's letters when he's talking about an opportunity to go somewhere. But aside from that, I think this idea of open doors as being spirit-led travel is not necessarily true, because a door could be open, but that doesn't mean that's where God wants you to go through. And then another door could be open. And Ian, you told me this a couple months back when we were hanging out before you moved, and it really struck me as like, the Lord will open doors, and they won't be the ones that you want Him to open, but that's where you're supposed to go.
Right.
And I think we know that we consciously understand that whenever it's said, but our hearts don't agree with it because we think, oh, a door is open and it lines up with what my flesh wants to do, I'll go do that. When really the Lord has a door open, which is not what our flesh wants to do, and that's what He's asking of us. So I think the idea of doors being open is not the best. It's not a good framework to think about things.
Yeah.
I also think of Jonah. You know?
Yeah. Look at where he traveled. Traveled the wrong direction and still got where he needed to be, even though he didn't want to be there.
Exactly. Yeah, even though he didn't want to be there, and even though he had a bad attitude up until the end, and even though it did cost him, 3 days underwater, and some suffering there, obviously it's better to just obey the Spirit's leading, even if it is challenging or requiring surrender of our plans.
Right.
Which is hard.
Yeah, super tough. Yeah, it goes back
like
to
you said.
What we said in the last episode, which is I forgot it. What was it? Oh yeah, it was the idea of thinking you can mess up God's plan. Like Jonah's the perfect example of thinking that you have the power to do that. Like even though God went the complete, Jonah went the complete opposite direction. God's like, whoop, this is where I want you.
Yeah.
He'll still use you.
Yeah.
Wherever his perfect plan is leading.
Which is hard to wrap your brain around, that somehow he gives us the incredible compliment of having a choice whether or not to listen.
Right.
But He's still going to do what He's set out to do,
right.
And it's not going to fail, and it's not going to be stopped by anything or anyone. We've talked about space, and we talked about spirit-led travel, and both of these things feed in back to the main outline. We started off by talking about what travel is, defining it, looking at how we travel through different types of escapes. And the goal of all of this is to understand what is the drive for most people, most of the time, traveling. Why do we want to travel so much? Evan, do you still have those 5 points that NASA listed? Do you have them written down, or?
5. Let's see. I can pull it up real quick.
That would be great because I can't remember them. But it's interesting that NASA writes this down because it's very similar to what we're going to be talking about.
Right.
Okay. So it says, why are we here? How did it all begin? Are we all alone? What comes next? And how can we make our lives better?
Yeah. So those are actually pretty profound, especially coming from a source which is not a Christian source, which I typically like to go to non-Christian sources, because if you go to a Christian source, it's just confirmation bias from the writer. But you go to non-Christian sources and they say the same stuff sometimes. So it's like with NASA right here, you have those 5 points. Are we all alone? How did we get here? Where are we going? How can we make life better? And that one specifically, I think, is tied to this idea of having vicarious travel through reading, through watching TV shows, movies, through hearing other people's stories, artwork, music. So when it comes to reading, for example, you have an author who creates a story, and we live vicariously through the imagination of the author and step into the world of their making. And we are either consciously or subconsciously placing ourselves in the story alongside the characters and the events that are happening. Which do you have like a book in your mind that you've read where you did that, whether consciously or subconsciously?
I don't read a lot of
I don't
fantasy
read
books.
a lot of.
Me neither.
I would say Harry Potter, or like not Harry Potter specifically, but Hogwarts Legacy. It's a video game.
Okay.
Yeah.
That story, like, you
Mm-hmm.
get invested.
You get invested.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I read a lot of books as a kid, and unfortunately I don't anymore, and I should read more books because I know it's really healthy for your brain. I read a lot of Marvel books, but there was this one series that I made like halfway through. It was called Extreme Adventures. The most like basic kids book you could ever hear, but it was like, man, what a crazy situation. I couldn't imagine myself in that situation as I imagined myself in that situation.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, what would I do? That'd be crazy. And that fueled a lot of like imagination. So those books,
Yeah.
Extreme Adventures.
I guess I read The Hunger Games. So
Yeah, there you go.
there's my
Yeah.
only like fantasy series that I read was Hunger Games. Only the first 3 books, because I think there's like 5 now. So
Oh,
Yeah, there's a whole bunch now.
yep.
But
Now I
yeah,
listen
we-
or read like not self-help, but educational books.
That's interesting. Like, and maybe TV, visual entertainment as well. Like, not just reading movies and shows. We can watch the lives of characters play out, and it's a whole story. Lots of people are working together to make this show. We can empathize with the characters. We can sympathize with how they're feeling, and we can relate to the stories. And also, we desire to find a place for ourselves in them, which I know I've experienced that where you're watching a well-produced movie and a well-produced TV show, and you get drawn in. That's kind of part of the design of a lot of TV, is to make a compelling story. Even music, which this is where I gathered this information from a article on Google Scholar by Peter Wust, I think is how you say his name, German. Music in the Brain, on natureexploring.science.com. What's really interesting is he says that music, and considering it as a form of travel, it activates your limbic and paralimbic systems, which is just your brain systems, which are in control of emotions and memories and hormones. So your amygdala, which is, fear and memories. Your NACC, which is the reward cycle. So your brain sets a goal. You achieve that. There's a reward. And just associated with motivation. Hormones, your hippocampus, which is, kind of dopamine, serotonin. And so when it comes to music, we can map images and experiences to sound based on, obviously, our perception of music, because what we think is happy music in the West might not be the same in a different culture.
right.
But we can travel vicariously through all of these things, and it requires our imagination, which means it's not necessarily somebody else's fault that we're using these things as an escape, right? Because we are the ones who are placing ourselves or imagining a situation where we fit into it. And I think that's a step further into understanding why most of us, most of the time, like to travel in these ways. And I have a question. This question I have thought about probably since I became a teenager, probably since I turned 12. So the past 8.5 years, I've been thinking about this question on and off. And I've never asked it to anybody because I will always think about it. It will stump me, and then I'll forget about it. But it's finally come to head. Finally, 8.5 years of thinking and asking questions, and I'm probably hyping this up too much. But there is this feeling, and I've experienced it, especially when I was younger, when I would finish a book series, or finish a TV show, or finish a movie series, or finish listening to a story, or something, big like that, where I can place myself into the story. There's a feeling that you get when it ends. Have you have you guys experienced that?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I want to go back. Like, man, I wish it wasn't over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you finish something beloved, like a TV show that you love, a movie series, book series, story. We feel a certain way because they took us places, and we placed ourselves in those situations and took ourselves places, essentially. So how would you describe this feeling personally, and do you have an example you could share?
Ooh, man, you're coming in with some good questions this episode, not gonna lie.
8.5 years, man. 8.5 years in the making.
So profound.
Oh,
I would
man.
say a lot of space movies do this to me. Like Interstellar, for instance. TV show wise, Over the Garden Wall did this, definitely.
Yeah, very well.
It just draws you into like this beautiful story with incredible characters and characters that are developed in a way, I'm sure purposefully, that you can relate to them. And I don't know, yeah, it's something about missing it. Like it's exactly like when a vacation ends or when a trip ends, the road trip's over, you're on the plane back, and you almost take advantage of the experience, and then you wish you could do it again so that you wouldn't take advantage of the experience. That happens to me a lot when I get on an airplane or get back in the car on my way home. I'm like, man, I wish I could go back and experience that more with a grateful spirit, a grateful attitude. Because I took advantage of a lot of the situations thinking about, man, I wish I was home in my own bed right now. This bed isn't comfortable. So I think it's related to like a trip, like the trip ending, I think is the best way to describe it. That feeling of when a show ends or a book ends or a video game ends or a movie ends is very similar to the end of a vacation or road trip.
Yeah.
For me, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I'm watching that right now.
Oh my gosh, I've watched the whole thing like 4 times probably. And I think the reason for me is I've placed myself as that character. And then once that series is done, it's like my adventure is like I'm done. Like I'm no longer that person. I'm no longer that character, and I have to like I think it's a reality check.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, oh, wait a second. Like, I'm not that. And I guess for me, it's more negative, but it could be, you could use it for good, I guess. But just like that reality check of, oh, wait a second. I'm not in that world with those people doing those things. Like, I'm in my own world, doing my own thing with my people, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess for me, it's a reality check. And it might just be that I'm getting older, too. I don't know what my response would have been 10 years ago.
Right.
But at 33, I guess I can look back with more experience or something. But it seems more like, oh, I'm living in somebody else's world. And so that shift in your brain is like, oh, I'm back to reality.
Yeah. It's right back to like living vicariously of like, man, that person's so special, and like I'm not. Like I wish I could be like that person. I wish I could be as heroic as that person,
Sometimes.
as brave as that person.
Yeah. Those are fantastic explanations. I have 3 sources which shared with me. One of them I'll leave anonymous. The other one is your sister Emery, and then the other one is my sister Abby.
Okay.
So,
You'll
anonymous
see them
one.
in the Friends episode.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll be coming back. So I asked this question. I'm so thankful that I finally asked it because people relate to it, and I think it reveals a fundamental truth about the human condition. So anonymous number 1 said, when I asked this question to them, how do you describe the feeling of when something like that ends, a great story ends? And they say you put yourself in that world, and when it ends, you're like, I don't want to leave this world. I do not want to leave these people behind. Think about that carefully.
Yeah.
Emery, I asked her because I know she reads a lot of books, and she said, it feels like you lose a friend group. I don't know what to do afterwards, after the story is done. And then Abby said, nostalgia sets in for what just ended. And it's like, it's not actually your memories because you weren't actually there, but it's a strong enough feeling and imagination that you immediately are like, man, if only I could experience that for the first time again, but I will never be able to, and that novelty is gone. And that was one of the reasons I had mentioned in my previous definition that we travel, is we're looking for novelty in the experience, and we try to achieve it. And then we experience it, and then we forget that that's what we were looking for, and it's gone, the chance is gone, and now it's done.
That's crazy.
And it's almost painful in a way. There's a sadness associated with it. And this is why I wanted to talk this way about travel and look at these unconventional modes, is because personally, I know that in my life, I have tried out all kinds of different things to be satisfied or content. A lot of those were escapes, like books, movies, video games, and things like that. And they were typically huge adventure stories. So you have things like Lord of the Rings, you have Narnia, you have really long book series, really big video games. And there were things like this which you could immerse yourself into. But then when it ends, you are kind of left lost. You're kind of left saying, I don't want this to be over. I don't want to leave this world. I don't want to leave these people behind. You get nostalgic about having experienced it for the first time, even though you didn't realize that that was happening because you forget, and then you don't know what to do. And I want to ask you guys this question. Anonymous 1, when I asked this question, is the one who said, I don't want to leave this world. I don't want to leave these people behind. If all we know of the human experience is that death is the end, and it's coming for every single person who has ever existed and ever will exist, isn't that the same attitude that you'd think we've have? I don't want to leave this world. I don't want to leave these people behind. This story is ending.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
I don't probably feel that way enough.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I should feel that way more. I should feel that grief, that all these people. That's how I felt that way a lot when I left my job to move out here. I met a lot of amazing, awesome people, and I know they weren't believers, and it was hard to think like, man, if I don't ever see these people again in the life that I'm living here on earth, there's a chance I'll never see them again beyond this.
At all. Yeah.
And I think that
and
it makes me sad, and it makes me wish. I always think, man, I should be praying for people more. I should be praying for people more that they will be saved, because it's a really hard pill to swallow to realize that these people you walk by and meet every single day, you meet people you'll never see again every single day, and you just walk by and say nothing.
And I think part of it is because we're too busy trying to escape the reality of death ourselves. We, as believers who are saved, and through Jesus saving us because of taking our sin on his shoulders, dying, rising again to prove he was who he says he was, we have this incredible, immeasurable, and unfathomable gift of being restored to relationship with him, so that life is different while we're alive, but that death is different because it's not the end, right? And so we have an eternity to look forward to with our Savior. But when we're not saved, it is that experience when we come to death, or when we finish a story, because we know all that we are going to die. We just tend not to like to think about it, but we say, I do not want to leave this world, and I don't want to leave these people behind. And I think that's perhaps part of why when something that we loved ends is painful, because if we're not saved, it's just pointing straight to what our end is, and we don't want to deal with that.
Right.
Which is hard pill to swallow, like you said.
Yeah.
I think that the reason people don't deal with death is because there are so many other escapes. I read this book series. Man, I'm so sad that it ended. I found another great book series. I just, it was just suggested to me. We have a very congested, stream of new, more experiences, more novelty, more travel through these vicarious things. And I think it's flooding our senses and blinding us to the truth that we are all going to die, that nobody remembers the former generations, and the people that are going to come after us are very unlikely to remember us. And that's a terrifying reality. Ecclesiastes is a book which talks all about this idea that there is nothing on earth, things that we can do, that can satisfy us. And I think that for Christians and people who are not Christians alike, we struggle with trying to find contentment and satisfaction in things which ultimately will only end up leaving us more thirsty, more dry. It's grasping for the wind because there's no actual substance there. We can experience these beautiful stories and we're given the ability to enjoy them from the Lord, but they're in no way a substitute for relationship with the Lord, because that's what we were designed for. And so long as you try plugging in a USB to a straight outlet, it's not going to fit. And if we're trying to find something to be our source of love that is not God, it's not going to complete us. And the only way that that is achievable is because of Jesus and what he did on the cross and his resurrection. We deserved to have the end of, I don't want to leave this world, I don't want to leave these people behind, but we have to because that's what our sin deserves. And he made a way out. So that's not the end now, if we choose to accept him, believe in him, and follow him as disciples. But I just want to know, that was a whole lot, of what you guys think. Would you say that personally you feel like sometimes these escapes that we have are just substitutes for something that we can't find in them? We're looking for something that we know we can't find in them?
I think oftentimes yes. It's weird. It's the human condition. It's what we struggle with every single day. It's the battle of flesh and spirit, of sin, of death and life. It's the everyday battle of, we have the answer, right, in the Bible and in Christ, and we often choose the substitute, even though the exact thing we're looking for is right there. Like, we look for the escapes in our life that's temporary satisfaction, even though we already have the ultimate escape. All we have to do is live our life according to Christ, and live our life the best we can, reflecting Christ and sharing and spreading the gospel and loving our neighbors. We already have that escape, but we're looking for the temporary stuff. We're looking for what we can have now rather than later.
Yeah, I think obviously the ultimate is Christ. There's not anything that beats that.
Right.
But I also think God created things for us to experience on earth, and in relationships, and in things like nature and that kind of stuff. I think those things should reflect Christ. Obviously, Christ is like the thing, but we can get satisfaction out of a good relationship, out of good friends, and I feel like that's like more of a genuine satisfaction, a more fulfilling satisfaction than like fantasy. Obviously, you're living it with your own eyes and in the present. But same with like going on a hike or just going for a walk alone, and you can hear the wind going through the trees, and you're just like, man, literally everything just worships the Lord all the time. Like, they're singing songs constantly, and you kick a rock along the road and it makes noise, and you're like, I think it's this idea of when you go into a world that doesn't exist, you lose the satisfaction. But when you live in the present and you're living with your eyes, like, once you have a relationship with Christ, you can see him everywhere and in everything. You're like, oh, wow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like, obviously, like video games and books and stuff, in a healthy way, they're okay. But when they're replacing the real thing, then you have a problem.
Yeah. And so NASA asks 5 legitimate questions. Why are we here? Because God made us for relationship and to worship and give him glory, because he is worthy of it. Where are we going? Well, if we've accepted Jesus Christ and we have him, the Son of God, we have life. If we don't, we don't. And separation from him who is life, which by definition would be death, that is where we go. We ask, how can we make our lives better? By giving it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these are all answers which you find in the Bible. And by the way, if you are not a believer and you are under the impression that Christians are a good people, that's a lie. That is not true. Christians are just as broken as anybody else. The only difference between a Christian and anyone else is that they have received Christ and are now being transformed into Christ's image because Christ is doing that work in them. And so they're starting to change and look different from how they used to. But they have no goodness in and of themselves. We're all broken and in the same boat together. And so we've all, at some point, been in the place, Christian or not, where we are not worshiping God. We're trying to worship something else because we're trying to fill something in our hearts that can't be filled with these substitutes, which are essentially idols. And like Evan said, they're not inherently bad, but we often turn them into substitutes. It's when something God has given us, we turn it into the ultimate thing. A good thing is turned into the ultimate thing. It becomes an idol.
Right.
I think that might be part of why we're desperate for escape sometimes, is because we're not content and satisfied. What is the priority in traveling? Whether it's unconventional modes or physical travel going somewhere.
What is the priority?
The next time that I travel physically, I guess, my body leaving North Carolina, maybe will be just to see family, to connect, be closer with my immediate family.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
my ultimate purpose, I guess, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grow. Yeah. See people, grow those relationships, and realize how beautiful creation is and what God has given us and put right in front of us.
I said those things about airplanes, but I do like flying, so
Me too.
like I like
It's pretty sweet.
to look at things
It is.
from that
Yes.
high up.
Traveling going forward, I definitely have to pay attention to where my heart is and make sure I'm not making it the end all be all, but something that I'm thankful for. Like Ian said, being thankful for what you are given to experience, regardless of whether or not it's comfortable. Yeah. So I think that brings us through all of the topics. Do you guys have any closing thoughts?
I don't think so.
I think I'm Gouda.
All right. We've talked about what travel is, how we travel unconventionally, and trying to understand why we love to travel. If I were to summarize it in a sentence, I think we're looking for something. And I'll tell you where to find the answer. Go and read the Bible, because it tells us the story and it answers all the questions that NASA was asking. It's a collection of historically accurate events that we can trust in because they are reliable. So I think that brings us to the end of this episode. If you have questions, if you have concerns, and if you disagree with us on points, don't keep that to yourself so that it brews. Share it with us. Talk to us. That brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you tune in next time. But before you do your research.
Yes.
See you in the next episode.
Peace out.
Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the coffee and the chat. Make sure to contact us and get in touch with us if you have something to say, questions, concerns. You can find us on podcast platforms at CoffeaTime Official, no spaces, that first C is a capital. On Instagram, we're CoffeaTime_official. On YouTube, CoffeaTime Official, capital CTO. And then on TikTok, we are CoffeaTime Official, no space. So again, thank you for listening. Make sure to go back to the beginning of the episode use those DIDAR rules to fact check everything we say. And we look forward to hearing from you. Take care and have a great undefined period of time.